Hello and welcome to the Heliosblog. My name is Helios. Today we're going to talk about whether emotion should come before reason. Here's an interesting discussion. We're going to talk about whether emotion or reason should be most important. Today we live in a world where emotion comes before reason. I would also argue we always have. Let's get to it, shall we? Enjoying my content? Check out my blog at heliosblog.com. On YouTube, you can support me by liking and subscribing. I'm also on Spotify if you'd prefer a podcast. If you're interested in my books, The Strategist Guide to Seduction and Quotes to Live By, they're available on Amazon. In addition, you can follow me on Patreon at theheliosblog for exclusive content. On with the show. Should emotion come before reason? I would argue that emotion should not come before reason. And the reason why is that so many people experience long-term negative consequences in their life because of poor logical reasoning and planning. If more people would use their logic rather than their emotion, they'd be better served in the long term. Our modern society does not encourage people to think. If they did, they might realize the terrible conditions they're living in. It favors the ruling class to foster ignorance in the population. After all, the more ignorant a population is, the more obedient they tend to be. Modern society. Our modern society is one that encourages ignorance and emotional reasoning. It encourages split-second decisions and basing people's lives on ephemeral things like love and chemistry. There is no thought to the long term or to the consequences of poor decisions. Our modern society encourages women to indulge their every alpha fantasy, while wasting away their precious commodity, their most precious commodity, which is their youth and beauty. Our society encourages people not to read, study, or try hard. It emphasizes quick fixes and get-rich-quick schemes. In short, society is all about short dopamine hits. These things do not serve anyone in the long term. Why most people are miserable today? The reason why most people are miserable today is because they never think strategically about their lives. In our modern society, people are so absorbed in their own dopamine hits and short-term pleasure, they never think about the consequences of their decisions. As a result, we get most of the population stuck in relationships they hate, in jobs they hate, and slaving away their lives to nothing. It's not a way to live for anyone, yet we call it normal. More people should think logically and strategically about how they should live their lives. If they would do so, they'd maximize the positives in their life while minimizing the negatives. What we are taught as young children. Nowadays, as young children, men are taught to be more like women and women are taught to be more like men. Since they're taught this way, everyone ends up miserable in the long term. Men find womanly qualities attractive and women find manly qualities attractive. The only thing teaching people the opposite accomplishes is a reduction in overall happiness and compatibility between the genders. As a result of this modern day rift, more couples are miserable than ever. If more people would use reason, they might arrive at the logical conclusion that teaching both genders to be the opposite of what the other gender wants is something that should be discouraged. The matriarchy. The matriarchy does not care about the happiness of either gender. It only cares about maintaining its own power. As a result, the matriarchy will continue to teach people to be more emotional. Teaching men to be rational might encourage all the wrong things, like critical thinking and a bettering of their lot in life. The matriarchy also doesn't care enough for women to teach them that they need to know. It doesn't care enough to teach women the things they need to know to attract a man they might want. The matriarchy encourages instead maximum female freedom and chasing alpha males, while not telling them that they're burning out their ability to pair bond with any male by doing so. The matriarchy does not tell women the cliff they're headed for. Instead, they encourage women to run off it at full speed. The scientific method. Rather than following base emotion, I encourage people to use the scientific method in their lives. Use what works, discard what doesn't. Constantly test and be willing to discard things and modes of thinking that aren't leading to the results you're looking for. If more people were to apply the scientific method to their daily lives, we would have much less misery and delusion in the world. People would know the truth and could use it to better their lives, rather than being told platitudes and failing in following them. Results of emotions coming before reason. As I've mentioned before, the result of emotions coming before reason in modern society is that the majority of people, 90%, become miserable in the long term. Most people do not end up in arrangements that they want in the long term and suffer greatly as a result. Without reason, the world devolves into madness and anarchy. We are seeing this in the modern dating market as more and more men are pushed out due to the mental prison they've been locked in from a young age. Their mental prison encourages them to indulge their emotions, ignore reason, and follow the dopamine. Expect things to get much worse before they get better. Use what works, not what you're told you have to do. Rather than following the terrible advice given to you by pop culture, your parents, your female friends, and your teachers, use a scientific method in your life. Use what works and discard what doesn't. If kissing a woman's ass didn't work the first time, what makes you think it will work the next 10 times? Apply this to everything regarding your relationships and you'll realize that most things you were taught are utter trash when it comes to getting the results you want out of life. Use what works and discard what doesn't. Remember that. Conclusion. We live in a society that encourages you to abandon your logic and use your emotions for everything. Most people live for their short-term pleasure with no thought about what their actions mean for the future. As a result of their poor choices now, most people, 90%, suffer terrible consequences later. I highly recommend that you use logic rather than your emotions when you consider your actions in order to create the best possible future for yourself. Be wise.